All right, all you likers, commenters, and subscribers, let's talk about the Scramble for China. This is very interesting because around the same time that there was a scramble for Africa, remember the Conference of Berlin was 1884. In 1884, there was also a war between France and China over control of Vietnam. And coming out of this war, and actually leading into it, were ideas about European partitioning of China, much as they had done in Africa. What's the background here? We're going to start with India, the reddish bit you see just over here. In the 7 Years' War, the British drove the French out of India. And to be fair, the French would have done the same thing to the British had they won, and we'd be looking at a very blue India instead of a red one. But history was what it was, and it's reddish. The British drove the French out of India. And consequently, the French felt like they needed to go around the British. They were looking at Vietnam as a place for expansion in the 18th century. After they had lost India, they were looking at Vietnam. That project got interrupted by the French Revolution. Things happened, they were distracted by Algeria, and then eventually, in the middle of the 1850s, they start looking back at the Vietnam area as a place for taking over an expansion. There is a altercation involving some missionaries in the Mekong, and the French move in and they take over the area around Saigon. The central Vietnam, which is where Hue is the key city, and Tonkin, North Vietnam, where Hanoi is the key city, were still under Vietnamese control. But in the years following the takeover of southern Vietnam, the French expanded their influence until by 1884 they were ready to assert themselves over Vietnam. Now, Laos and Cambodia come in a little bit later once they have, there was a French Siam conflict in the 1890s, and the government of Siam cedes those areas over to France. But this is 1884. So while there's a Berlin Conference going on, the French are trying to assert themselves over all of Vietnam, and that's this area here, Tonkin, Annam, and Mekong. Now, in the game, Annam and Mekong are colored red because the British are running those. Tonkin is bluish because the French have taken it. But in the hot timeline you and I live in, that should have been all blue. Now, the government of Vietnam did not want to be dominated by the French. The peasants of Vietnam were realizing it's going to be dominated by one group or another. We're not really enthusiastic about either one. But the government felt very enthusiastic about its own position. So it appealed to China. China was a tributary overlord of Vietnam. The French were meddling in Vietnam without Chinese approval, and the Chinese felt like they should assert themselves there, much as they felt that they should assert themselves over Korea if anybody was to be involved there, or Tibet. And you can see also on this map that Tibet has gotten a little bit of a reddish pinkish hue because the British are in there. Yeah, there's a story with that. But as it back to this French-Chinese war, or the Sino-French War of 1884-1885, the French asserted themselves in northern Vietnam. The Chinese responded by getting a group called the Black Flag Army, and they basically controlled the Red River as it flowed into Yunnan and blocked French advances northward into China. The Black Flag Army was run by a warlord. He was collecting revenue for himself rather than for the government of China, but because he had an army and they found a way to make it work. So he was able to defeat the French on a few battles, but the French finally beat his army back. The Chinese army came in and attacked the French in northern Vietnam. The French won a few battles, the Chinese won more than a few battles, and if the entire war was fought out with only land forces, one would be able to say that the Chinese would have won that conflict and would have been able to knock the French back to Saigon area and end it that way. But it didn't end that way because the French had a navy, and the French navy, being modern, was able to blockade the Chinese sail into their ports, blow up the fleets as they were. They could navigate up the rivers and destroy things along the way, laying waste to countryside. The Chinese had some modernized forces at this time. They'd been looking around. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew that if they didn't modernize, that they would be targeted by the Europeans. So they had what were called the Beiyang forces. I hope I said that right. Beiyang, Beiyang. And these were modernized. So they had the Beiyang army, which was equipped with European weaponry, including artillery made by the Krupp Corporation. And they were trained by European officers, and they were drilled and prepared in modern combat tactics. So they were considered to be as effective as any other troops in the world that were trained to those high European standards. The Beiyang Navy was modernizing with non-sail ships, steamships, ironclads, things that were ready to go head to head with another modern navy. But in this conflict, the Beiyang Navy stayed in port in North China, meaning the rest of the Chinese Navy was exposed in southern China and destroyed. Because of that naval dominance that the French had, they were able to essentially shut down Chinese trade overseas and force the Chinese to agree to a peace that would recognize the French authority in Vietnam and give some additional treaty port extensions and some more what were called concessions, or small blocks of territory within Chinese or within the geography of China that would be governed by the French. This was something that was happening even before that. You see Hong Kong here, that's actually administered by the British, and Macau actually administered by the Portuguese. But more common were smaller areas all through China's ports and even some industrial cities inland, where foreigners had their own area, and they actually built the houses and government buildings to look like back home. So if you even today in Shanghai, you can go through parts of town and see where the Russian concession was, where the French concession was, where the American concession was, and you'll see buildings built in those styles, and they're maintained that way simply for the sake of history. But so the French get this. Now, what didn't happen coming out of that war were additional demands made for territory in China, and those were considered by the French. They thought that if they took over Vietnam, this was the plan way back when, that if they took over Vietnam, it would allow them to expand into southern China, into Yunnan, Guangxi, Guangdong, Guizhou, these areas. And by exerting influence there and controlling territory there, it would counterbalance the British in India. That was the plan. Well, in the course of this war, towards the end, the Japanese were offering to help the French out, and the Russians were offering to help the French out because they saw potential gains there. The Russians, by the time they already had outer Manchuria, they were looking at taking the rest of Manchuria over. The Japanese wanted Korea and territory on the eastern Chinese seaboard. They were willing to join the war in order to get those territorial demands. So, like the Crimean War, where Russia was able to sign a peace deal before the Swedes, Germans, and everybody else got involved, and France ordered their complete dismembering in the far west of Russia, the Chinese were able to sign a deal with the French before any carving up happened from Japan or Russian quarters. So that is the French-Chinese War of 1884-1885 in a nutshell. But it gave indication that the Chinese army was weak, with the exception of the Beiyang forces. The rest of it was not ready to go. It was pretty easy to defeat in battle. If you had enough numbers and enough ammunition, it could be done. And that there was still a lot of wealth in China. If you didn't get it first, someone else would get it. The thinking was, if the Ottomans were the sick man of Europe, then China is the sick man of Asia and needs help from Europeans. Now, this is a very odd idea of help that the Europeans have, where they are going to go in and build lots of things and change the way traditions are and put in their own buildings and organization and administration. And that is what they're going to see. They're going to see the bridges they build and the factories they build and all these other elements of progress and say, this is worth it all. You guys in China should be thankful to us for having built these things for you. But the way they were built was by exploiting Chinese labor. Many times it was forced labor, just working them incredibly hard. And don't come back and say, oh no, it didn't. It did. There are plenty of documentation both in Chinese sources and European sources that indicate an extreme amount of brutality, insensitivity, direct racism towards the Chinese people. So all of this modernization that the Europeans are only looking at, they fail to see the inhumane conditions that they were subjecting the Chinese to. And the same can be said for what they did in India, Africa, anywhere else that they were colonizing. The Europeans tended to focus on what they considered progress, signs that the place looked a lot more like Europe than it did before we got here, but they did not look at the inhumane treatment that they meted out to the natives, the people who were already there, in order to build that up. Let's be very clear on that. Now, also going on around this time as the French War with China, the British are interested in Tibet historically. They fear that Russian agents are working with Tibet to break it away and make it join with Russia, and that's part of the great game. They're already moving through Central Asia, and now the British fear that all of Western China out down to Tibet may be lost to the Russians. And so to preempt the Russians, the British go into Tibet. When the British get to Tibet, they find that there is almost no Russian influence there at all, and that the Tibetans and Chinese are very vigorous in opposing the British. They eventually withdraw. In this game, I don't think they will, but the British are there. The Russians, as I mentioned, wanted Manchuria, and although they couldn't conquer it because the French-Chinese War ended too soon, they did start building railroads there, and they were able to get concessions from the Chinese government to control the land that the railroads ran across. And that meant the Russians would control the commerce in Manchuria. All the coal and iron and other goodies that were coming out of the ground there, the Russians controlled that commerce. And that's why they built their base at Port Arthur and connected it with Vladivostok and the Trans-Siberian Railroad. That was their area. In 1895, the Japanese had a war with China and took Korea away from China and added it to Japan, more or less. There was some more annexation that followed thereafter. I'm simplifying the very complicated history between Japan and Korea, but that history started in earnest in 1894, 1895. In 1904-05, there was the Russo-Japanese War, where the Chinese in Manchuria had to face Russians and Japanese fighting over their soil for control of that region. The rest of China is being considered for further exploitation. Certainly there's already the economic exploitation that's going on, but as the French were looking at southern China as their area to expand into, the British saw the entire Yangtze River system as something that they were interested in exploiting, along with coastal China. The Germans saw the Shandong Peninsula and the Yellow River as something that they wanted to exploit further. The Russians wanted northern China, western China, and any other part of China they could get. They're assembling to make their claims and are considering military action. What would it take? What do we have to do in order to invade China? What's the whole logistics of this? And as this was happening, the United States had a war with Spain. And as a result of that war in 1898, the United States picked up Spanish colonies in Guam, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Now, the United States gave Cuba to the Cubans, but held very strong control of its government. It made territories of Puerto Rico and Guam, and to the Philippine government, it essentially asserted it made it a puppet government of theirs. And there's a whole history of that I'm going to set aside. But they were in the region, and they had an active interest in trade with China. And rather than sending in soldiers to occupy things, because they had a really horrible occupation experience in the Philippines, this may have been coloring their view. Rather than invade China and deal with potential peasant uprisings and popular uprisings for the whole duration of that conflict, they thought, what if we just keep things the way they are and have what's called an open door policy? Nobody will assert territorial control over China. Leave that to the Qing Empire. They're weak, but we can prop them up. And if we prop them up, they'll be thankful for that, and they'll let us have our extensive economic control over elements of the Chinese economy. That's what you want. You want economic control of the economy, basically, he said with a tautology. And the other European countries felt like, well, yeah, that's a good idea, but we'll sign this open door treaty only if the other guys agree to sign it. And John Hay, the Secretary of State for the United States, was actually able to go and get agreement in principle from the European nations concerned, got them to sign it or agree to it. And yeah, it was agreed to on paper. They still would exploit the interior in ways that would exclude other powers, but there was so much of it that, a country could pick and choose where it went. And as a result, there was extensive amount of what was called extraterritoriality for other entities. And even places that didn't have colonies in Africa, they were able to get little enclaves, little concessions here and there in various cities, and have overseas colonies, small as they were, but they had them. Even Austria-Hungary had one of those. Yeah. People say, oh, they had no overseas colonies. They did have one little one in China. Well, it hardly counts. You're right, it hardly counts. Italy had them. Belgium had them. Of course, France, England, Germany, the big guys, USA, Russia, they all had theirs. When the Chinese revolted against this in 1900 with what's called the Boxer Rebellion, 7 European nations plus the United States formed the coalition of 8 nations and invaded China to enforce these economic arrangements. They were not being fair. They were bullying the Chinese and forcing them into these. And this is an incredibly sore period for Chinese history. It's called the entire century is seen as a century of a lost century, a century of repression, a century of shame and humiliation. And official Chinese history will document every single incident. There's what's called a dictionary of humiliation that catalogs every incident, every one of these actions that were done that they considered a humiliation. Every penetration of their economy with an unfair advantage and unfair treaty, they've documented. And it is not a slim volume. It is 1.5 inches thick, this dictionary of humiliation. And so, again, now some maybe say, well, that's the Chinese communist view. But again, you find documentation that supports this in the archives of the United Kingdom, of France, of the United States, of Russia, and so forth. They're there. The scramble for China was almost like the scramble for Africa. But aside from military involvement in Tibet, by Britain and Russia taking portions of China like Tuva, Outer Manchuria, they took Ili and then gave most of it back. But the little bit of Qing Tomsk you see, like right here, yeah, that went to Russia as well. So aside from those and Japan's taking of Korea, Qing China remained territorially intact up until the war with Japan, starting in 1931, which intensified in 1937 and was not concluded until 1945. There, the territorial integrity of China was extremely violated. But even though the territory of China was not violated the same way that the territorial integrity of Africa was violated, the economic integrity of China was severely violated and severely exploited, and hundreds of thousands of Chinese suffered and even died as a consequence of the European movements within China to modernize, to make it more like Europe, to ultimately make a profit off of the backs of the Chinese. And this is, again, one more time, let me stress, this is not a socialist reading of history. This is not a leftist reading of history. This is a reading of history. The facts are there. No matter who you are, if you accept truth, you must accept that these things were happening because they're very well documented. Now, if you want to say that the benefits outweighed the losses, that's your call. But I say the exploitation was absolutely there. Do not ever forget that, and do not ever let anyone talk you into seeing it otherwise, because the facts are there for all to see. Now, that is the history part of the scramble for China. Let's go into the game part, and we'll have a little more history to go along with it, because here we see what's going on in 1872 with my French game here. You'll notice a brown patch. The North German Confederation turned out they formed the buffer state I made here in Rhineland. They went and joined with the Germans. Can't count on buffer states for nothing these days. Baden held out, though, and Germany launched an attack on Baden to try to incorporate it. I defended Baden and didn't ask anything else out of it. I was just coming to the defense of an ally. But as a result of that, the infamy that had gone up from doing a few other actions I had to do in the intervening 10 years, it was able to go down during that war. So now I'm at infamy 0, ready to start picking up pieces of China. And not like porcelain, like actual territory, because that's what the world is ready for right now. I've built armies here. I have Légion d'Extrême Orient and Légion de Chine du Sud in my terrible French. Legion of the Far East, Legion of Southern China. And I've taken the last bit of Vietnam that the British didn't take, so I would have a springboard into China. Why not naval invasion? I'll tell you why not. I tried that in another, I did another recording of this, and I did a naval invasion, and it didn't work. The Russians got involved, so I was like, well, how am I going to tie down the Russians? Well, I'll have to naval invade the Russians, which I did, and was able to do some things with that. But naval invading China, once I got the beachhead, I clicked on the general and did something weird, and then he wound up getting kicked out. And like, wait, what? How? Wait, no. And the whole thing fell apart. So I said, forget this. Let's do it again. And I'm going to have a base in southern China to launch my attack from. This changes the rationale I had, because originally I was saying, well, obviously the French should go after the central part of China's coast, because that way they are not too close to the Russians and they're not too close to the British. The British will have designs in this area. That is fine. And we will focus on central Chinese coast and be fine there. And yes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, like all justifications for war, it's flimsy as heck. I can make a new one if I have to. Let's justify the southern Chinese theater. Yes, we are close to the British, but we have a good relationship with them. We've actually built it up to amicable, level 55. We have a trade deal with them, so they understand that their best interests lie with ours, and we can do things to help China get better. The British have already worked on Tibet. We can help out other parts of southern China. Again, if we look at our states here, oh, silly me, I'm looking at the population. Oh, yeah, because the British control about 160 million people in India. And they've already got a population rivaling ours in terms of what they've incorporated directly. We in France need to get large parts of the world's population under our control to act as a counterbalance to the British. So in case we do have another war with them again, they don't kick us out of China. And we may even have enough Chinese to kick them back out of India if we have to. But right now we're at peace with the British. We're friends with them. We're sure that they will understand when we take over things like Yunnan, Sichuan, Guizhou, Guangxi, Guangdong, Hunan, Chongqing, Jiangxi, Fujian, Zhejiang, Shaozhou, Western Hubei, Eastern Hubei, and, just small parts of China. They'll understand. And we'll understand that by adding things that have population of 18 million, 15 million, 28 million, 9 million, still, when you consider, like, oh, only 9 million, that's way more than we have. Have you looked at the rest of the world? This is where the population is that isn't run by the British. If we're not going to have a war with the British to take over Bengal and Delhi and Punjab, then we are going to have a war with China to take over these territories. What's in them? If we take a look at, did any of these grow opium? Oh, Yunnan grows opium. Maybe we want some of that. As does Guizhou. What about Sichuan? They can grow. Oh, wow, they can grow a lot of opium there. Guangxi? No opium there. Why am I looking for opium? Well, I'll tell you why. We kind of need it for, stuff and things that are around here. They might be interested in it. And the opium trade, that should be another topic for another episode, just opium in and of itself. And not just what the British did to China, but how it became an integral part of the national Chinese revenue system. Fascinating story there. But I have now digressed. Southern China's got a lot of silk and tea, but, maybe all we need is just Yunnan right now, Guizhou, Guangxi, and Guangdong, and then we can spread out from there later. Because each one of these, if we look at them and do conquer state, is going to cost us 12 and a half on the infamy. So if we take 4 of them, that's 48. Oh, that would be 50.4 infamies. Just a little bit over infamous because I've got the mod for that. And yeah, it looks like the Russians and the Qing Empire and maybe also the Tokugawa shogunate and maybe even Persia would line up with the Chinese. If we start knocking over these states, we're going to lose 6 reputations with the United Kingdom and North German Confederation if we stay in southern China. If we hit northern China, then we're going to have minus 6s for the United Kingdom and Russia. Now, having said that, if we did go to northern China, that could be fun too. We just take a little bit of southern and a little bit of northern and, mix it all together. What if we did 4? If we did 4 coastal provinces, that would look kind of coastally. But let's consider. Let's also consider the urban setting here. Sichuan's got 5, Yunnan 5, Guizhou got 6, Guangxi got 5, Guangdong 7, Shaozhou has got 2, Hunan 3, Jiangxi 6, Fujian 5, Zhejiang 7, 6, 3. Nanjing is 10. Suzhou is 7. Jiangsu is 7. Shandong is 6. Beijing is 14. But that's a long way to march. Let's stick with our local territory. Maybe we don't need to take Guizhou. Maybe we just focus on Guangdong, Guangxi, and Yunnan. And then the next war we have, we could do some other damage. Or maybe Guangdong, Guangxi, Yunnan, and Sichuan. They've got 16 million people there, and it's a pretty good urban building going on. Lots of wealth there and population. We could raise a big old army out of these guys. Maybe those are the 4 we'll take. And then we can spread out from there. Chongqing. Chongqing has got a lot of people. 23 million. Oh, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let me go ahead and save my game. There we go. Because we want to have a place we can come back to in case I really screw things up. And now we return to game. And now we're going to we're going to declare war and try to get Guangdong. If we don't, if they peace out on this, then that's the one we want. Uh, we won't press for primary details for the others. So yeah, we'll do that. We'll conquer state Guangdong. This will make the British a little upset with us, but we could do something with that. We can begin improving relations with the British. Yeah. All right. Now, we're going to have to move some troops over here. We're going to get the war going. We'll see if the Russians support them. You know how this goes. I'll come back if we have if they peace out or if we have a war. And because that's the exciting part there. So I'll catch you on the flippity flip. They did not back down. We got a war. Okay, what are we demanding? Guangdong, Yunnan, Guangxi, Sichuan, and Qing war reparations. We want nothing from Russia. That will make it easy to knock them out of the war if we should invade St. Petersburg and take them over. We want the Chinese territory that is adjacent to Tonkin. And this will also, taking over Yunnan and Sichuan, will kind of wall off the British here. Now, they could still make a play for Shaozhou, but or Shaozhou, whichever. But they'll have to head north, and let's face it, Qinghai is only got 1.39 million people. Population-wise, the British have to go in a direction that isn't very profitable, whereas we can get more of China, and we intend to get more. We want to do to China what the British did to India. That's in the game. Me personally, I don't want to do any of that. I'm against it all. But in the game, I got to think like a chauvinistic French guy building an empire, and because that's how we survive as a nation. And so I will do that. We're going to have our soldiers press forward there, and over here to keep the Russians busy. They've got a pretty big army. Let's go ahead and give them an invasion to work around here. We'll invade Ingria. We'll use the Escadron du Nord. We have a tiny penalty because we have one battalion more than they do. I'm fine with that. And let's go ahead and kick back and watch. I think, thank you for finding oil in East Borneo there. I think over here we've got mostly Chinese. I see 31, 25. I'd say about maybe 100 Russian troops or so. And the rest are Chinese here. And we are doing a fantastic job. Our total military strength is 35-1. China has got a tenth of that, less than a tenth. And Russia has got, well, 2/3 of that. So, yeah, but if we can keep the Russians busy over here, trying to defend against this invasion, and actually if we win the invasion, if we actually take Ingria, that would be fine. Yeah, I won't stop them there. Good gosh. Oh yeah, we are sinking a lot of convoys. That their fleets have not come out of the port. And Qing is in default. Let's make sure, in no uncertain terms, we want to press all of our goals. And French Banks is losing prosperity. I can live with that. The Russian army is losing prosperity. If they win out there, then we've got the first army ready to go in there. Of course, it's as early days. Landing progress, 0%. And we've got the electric telegraph. That improves our troops, I believe. Yeah, give them a little boost up there. We're researching nothing but military technology right now. And they're in panicked retreat. Oh, this is not good when you're trying to defend your capital and you have a panicked retreat. All right, let's see what it does to them. And bam, 25%. All right, so that's what happened in Russia. Meanwhile, in China, that is significant there. Let's go ahead and make sure we have Sichuan as our strategic objective. That way we will be sure to take it. because we've already got one. Yeah, we've already got Guangdong, whatever that one is, Guangxi, Yunnan. Yeah, Guangdong, Guangxi, Yunnan, and now Sichuan. If we take, and then after Sichuan, we just say Beijing is the next goal, guys. Just plow your way forward. Over here back in Russia, we got a little naval squabble going on, but what the Russian fleet strength is 4403. So that's about 20 per ship. We are at 12404. That's about 40. Wait, 300 times. Yeah, 40 per ship. So our ships are twice as good as the Russian ones, and they've only got 30 there, and we have 111 or 110. Yeah, they're going to get hurt bad. Meanwhile, in China, okay, yeah, okay. So there they go. They went to the Horn of Africa to nick our convoys. I see you, Russia. Okay. Well, this is going to go quick anyway. What? We're having a coup? No, 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 no. Keep an eye on Pierre Charon, and let's not have a coup happen against us. Come on, we even got an economic boom here. We came out of the Depression. We're having a wonderful time here. Oh, two possible actions. Let's go ahead and increase interest rates. Why do you want to increase interest rates when you're having a boom? It's because when you have a crash, you're going to want to lower the interest rates. Increase when times are good, decrease when times are bad. Fiscal discipline. Or is this monetary? No, this is monetary discipline. Fiscal discipline is what I got here, where we're collecting more. We're just right about as much as we spend. Fiscal discipline. We're all disciplined here. Yeah, because I'm an economist. There you go. See, economics as we do the game here. Ooh, threshing machines. Let's, can we dump our grain on the world market here? He said as a bit of a distraction. Grain. Yeah, we sure could. Okay, well we'll look into that. Actually, more than dumping grain on the market, it means you have fewer farm laborers and they can go off and do other things besides working on the farms. But let's take care of business here in China. Did we invade Russia yet? We are still contesting. Okay. German Confederation wants a trade agreement with us? Okay. We'll take it because it'll improve our relations with them. And honestly, I don't want another war with Germany. Hey, where are all the Russians going? Don't you know I'm invading you? Okay, well, I guess the Navy's holding them off. They just want to really shore up the Chinese over here because they're at minus 30. They're closing down. Oh, yeah, let's retreat the coup progress by 15%, and democracy is saved. Well, so much for the petty bourgeoisie. They're out. This is going to be a quick war here. This is because we had Tonkin as the base there, and it was a land war. The naval invasion, that didn't work out so good. I'll let them sink a few more of my convoys. I built them back pretty quickly here. Yeah, we'll be fine with that. We're sinking their convoys pretty well. And yeah, it should be a matter of time, really. A short matter of time. They're at minus 85. What happens next week? They go to minus what? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's a week. Let's go ahead and propose that peace deal. We got it. Scramble for China. Check. We got it. And this is a really good place to now save the game. Also, so we can compare how long it took to do this thing. Yeah, the last save was 1872-0309. This is 1873-0127. So 10 months, 10, 11 months, 10 and a half months, we'll say, is what this war took. Yeah, that very well could have been China's situation had the European powers gone forward with their plan to carry out a scramble for China. This could have happened. And yeah, that would have been pretty horrible. Pretty horrible. But it's only happening in fiction right now and not in real life. And I do not ever advocate the invasion of another country. I advocate peace and peaceful solutions. But this is a game. So remember that. This is a game. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the history and the little bit of economics I had in there about interest rates. Oh yeah, the PEC mod. This is great stuff. I'm the person who is in charge of the mod is we're having a nice conversation on my Discord. So if you are enjoying the mod and you'd like to be able to offer suggestions, make sure that they're grounded in reality. Don't just say, "Hey, I think it should be like this," but research it and think it through. But if you'd like to, you can join our Discord. Make sure you like and comment and subscribe. If you have made it this far and you have not already subscribed, do it. If you have not already liked, like it. And if you need to make the comment that makes the algorithm happy, just say, "Yo, bro, love it." And that makes it do so much better to help share it with other people who have these interests. I'm very happy to be here and to give more information. And oh, hello, it looks like the Ottoman Empire took over Oman. Well, I didn't see that one coming. But has anybody... Oh, and the USA has captured quite a lot of Mexico there. And Peru, Bolivia, look, they took some more of Brazil, or is that the same? I don't know. They're going kind of crazy there. The world is nuts because look at that. Anyway, if you so yeah, if you like talking Victoria 3 and you like making good suggestions and asking questions, that's the best way to reach me there. Make comments, like, subscribe. I'm already at 41 minutes, which actually is kind of short for a video when I consider how I had other ones that went for 47 minutes or longer. But you know what? Not everybody wants a 47 one. Sometimes you want one that's just 40 minutes, and I totally understand that. And, well, here I am rambling again. When am I going to hit that stop button? When am I going to stop recording? When is it finally going to